The year 2477 was, by most accounts, a dull one for galactic civilization. The major wars had been fought, the grand explorations completed, and the last of the ancient alien mysteries had, for the most part, been catalogued and filed away. Humanity, having secured its place in the galactic community, had settled into a comfortable, if somewhat complacent, existence. Interstellar travel was routine, energy was abundant, and most sentient species lived in a state of agreeable, if uninspired, peace. The future, it seemed, was here, and it was. Beige Dr. Eris Thorne, a xenobotanist specializing in the classification of sentient mosses, found the present thoroughly uninspiring. He yearned for the vibrant chaos of the past, for the mysteries unsolved, the frontiers unconquered. His personal quarters aboard the research vessel Stardust Dreamer were a shrine to antiquity. Holographic projections of crumbling Earth cities, antique physical books, and a collection of meticulously restored 21st century video game consoles. He was a man out of time, longing for a bygone era he had only ever read about. His colleague, Dr. Lena Petrova, a renowned xenolinguist, felt a similar ennui. Her work, once a thrilling decipherment of new alien languages, had devolved into translating interspecies shipping manifests. She found solace in recreating ancient human music, her violin weeping mournful tunes from a forgotten past. Their routine, like the galaxy itself, was predictable. They were currently orbiting Xylos, a gas giant known only for its atmospheric anomalies and the occasional tedious magnetic storm. Eris was attempting to grow a genetically modified fern in 0G, while Lena was trying to teach a particularly stubborn databot how to appreciate a classical concerto. Then the wave hit. It wasn't a physical wave. There was no seismic tremor, no energy surge. It was an invisible, pervasive force that swept over the Stardust Dreamer, passing through its hull as if it were not there. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The lights didn't flicker. The comms didn't static. Then, the ship's ancient, barely functional coffee maker, a relic from the early days of interstellar travel that Eris had painstakingly restored, suddenly sputtered to life with an almost joyful gurgle, dispensing a fresh, steaming cup of actual coffee, not the usual flavorless synth brew. It was a minor miracle. On Eris's console, a notification popped up. Not a work-related memo, but an old pixelated icon for Galactic Conquest 3, a 22nd century strategy game he hadn't touched in years. His fingers twitched almost instinctively for a joystick that wasn't there. Lena, mid-bow on her violin, felt a sudden, profound rush of inspiration. Not for a new concerto, but for a forgotten melody. A haunting folk tune her grandmother used to sing. Her fingers moved on their own, finding notes she hadn't played in decades, imbuing them with a raw, undeniable emotion she hadn't felt in years. On the view screen, the placid gas giant Xylos shimmered. But now, overlaid on its swirling clouds, were faint, ghost-like images. Ancient spacecraft, their designs long obsolete, flying in formation. Battle-worn flagships from the human Vril Wars, long since decommissioned and turned into museums, seemed to streak across its gaseous surface. They were images of a past that hadn't quite happened there but felt like it should have. What in the nine hells was that? Eris whispered, staring at the ghostly fleet. Lena, her violin still singing the forgotten tune, looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. I think, she said, I think something just woke up the past. The wave, which they quickly dubbed the chrono-resonance event, spread like wildfire. Not through physical space, but through consciousness itself. It affected sentient beings across the nearby star systems, bypassing language, species, and even biological differences. Everywhere it hit, it sparked an intense, overwhelming wave of nostalgia. For humans, it was a sudden, visceral longing for the good old days, whatever that meant to each individual. Antique tech came back online. Forgotten hobbies resurfaced. Old rivalries, long since settled, began to feel strangely potent again. On the Stardust Dreamer, the coffee maker brewed endless cups, and the comms array, which had been unreliable for years, suddenly began to pick up ancient, defunct radio broadcasts from long-dead planets. For the Vril, a species of logical corporate efficiency, the chrono-resonance triggered a longing for their ancient, pre-concordate days, a time of ruthless, unfettered expansion and cutthroat competition. Their stock markets, which had been stable for centuries, began to fluctuate wildly as old. Aggressive corporate strategies, long since outlawed, suddenly seemed like brilliant ideas. The Ceylani, a species of serene telepathic empathy, felt a sudden, profound connection to their communal ancestors. Their telepathic network, usually a calm, ordered hum, became a cacophony of ancient prayers, forgotten songs, and long-dead voices echoing through their collective minds. They began to feel the joy and sorrow of their primordial ancestors, emotions they had long since filtered out for the sake of galactic harmony. Dr. Eris Thorne, fascinated and terrified, devoted all ship resources to analyzing the phenomenon. "It's not just accessing memory," he explained to Lena, his console now displaying a riot of anomalous energy readings and historical data. "It's amplifying it. It's making the past feel more real, more vital than the present. It's like a cosmic drug, forcing everything to remember its peak, its origin, its glory days." Lena, meanwhile, was experiencing a profound shift in her own work. The ancient music she played now had an audience. The databot, which had ignored her before, now sat attentively, its optical sensors pulsing in time with her violin, recognizing the patterns, the emotions, the story within the notes. It had apparently developed a soul. The biggest problem was Commander Valerius, the ship's grizzled by-the-book captain. Valerius had been a decorated officer in the last great human-Viral war, a conflict that had ended decades ago in a tense, uneasy truce. The chrono-resonance hit him hard. He started wearing his old battle-scarred uniform, polishing his antique energy pistol, and reviewing ancient tactical drills from forgotten campaigns. He began to see the friendly Viral patrols in the nearby sector not as allies, but as old enemies. "This is getting dangerous," Lena whispered to Aris as Valerius stared intently at a blurry image of a Viral scout ship on the view screen, his hand resting on his pistol. "He's not remembering the war. He's reliving it." Aris nodded, his own mind buzzing with the sudden powerful urge to play Galactic Conquest 3 one last time. "We need to find the source of this wave," he said, forcing himself to focus. "Before the entire galaxy decides its best days are behind it, and decides to go back." Their analysis of the chrono-resonance event quickly led them to the gas giant Xylos. The wave was emanating from its core, an impossible feat for a gaseous body. Xylos was supposed to be geologically inert, a placid orb of hydrogen and helium. The idea of something generating such a complex psychic temporal phenomenon from within it was absurd. "The data is irrefutable," Eris stated, his voice tight. "Whatever is generating this wave, it's inside Xylos, deep inside. And it's expanding." Captain Valerius, his eyes gleaming with the phantom light of old glory, slammed his fist on the console. "Then we go in, we find it. We neutralize it. This threat to galactic stability must be eliminated." "With all due respect, Captain," Lena interjected, "we have no idea what it is. For all we know, it's a sentient superorganism, or a Forerunner artifact, or a cosmic reset button. Charging in blindly could trigger something far worse." "Caution is the language of cowards, Doctor," Valerius replied, his gaze fixed on the gas giant. "I remember a time when humanity faced the unknown with courage, not trepidation. My duty is to protect the compact, and this nostalgia is a weapon of mass destabilization." He was right. Already reports were filtering in from other species. Minor trade disputes escalating into full-blown territorial conflicts, as old borders reasserted themselves in the collective consciousness. The Viral had just issued an ultimatum to a nearby agricultural world, demanding a return to an ancient tribute protocol. The galaxy was regressing. Past Valerius ordered the Stardust Dreamer to prepare for deep atmospheric entry into Xylos. Their ship was a research vessel, not built for the crushing pressures and corrosive atmosphere of a gas giant's core. It was a suicide mission. "There has to be another way," Lena pleaded. "We can communicate with it. We can understand it." "It's not communicating, Doctor. It's affecting," Valerius said, strapping himself into his pilot's couch. "And it's affecting for the worse. Humanity was once defined by its future, by its ceaseless drive for progress. This thing, it's trying to drag us back into the past, and I won't let it." As the Stardust Dreamer began its slow, perilous descent into the swirling, multicolored clouds of Xylos, Eris and Lena realized the grim truth. They weren't just fighting a cosmic phenomenon. They were fighting their own captain's nostalgia, a force as dangerous and unpredictable as anything the galaxy could throw at them. And if they couldn't find the source of the wave, Their ship, and perhaps the galaxy, would be trapped forever in a glorious, deadly past. The descent into Xylos was a nightmare of crushing pressure and violent storms. The Stardust Dreamer groaned under the strain, its hull lights flickering, its structural integrity warnings blaring. Outside the view screen, the swirling gas clouds turned into a maelstrom of violent atmospheric phenomena, illuminated by flashes of internal lightning. Pressure at 50,000 atmospheres and rising. Eris yelled over the ship's alarms, his face grimly set. Hull integrity at 40%. We won't last much longer, Captain. Captain Valerius, however, seemed to thrive in the chaos. His eyes, fixed on the deepening gloom ahead, shone with a grim, almost joyous determination. The deeper they went, the stronger the chronoresonance became, and the more the captain's past seemed to consume him. "Push it!" he roared, his hands locked on the controls. "A true starship doesn't break, Doctor. Only its crew does." He was reliving every harrowing re-entry, every desperate maneuver from his glorious past. Lena, her xenolinguistic tools now focused on the source of the wave itself, gasped. "I'm getting a coherent pattern. It's like a song, a lullaby almost, but it's incredibly complex, layered with thousands of different frequencies, each one a different memory." Eris, meanwhile, had found the physical source. His geological scanners, straining against the interference, had finally pinpointed it. Deep within Xylos' core, nestled within a shell of super-dense metallic hydrogen, was a structure. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a city, a vast, impossibly ancient and perfectly preserved metropolis built from a strange, shimmering crystalline material that resonated with every frequency of the chronoresonance. "It's a city," Eris yelled, pointing at his screen, which showed a ghostly, shimmering outline of impossible architecture. "A Forerunner city, and it's emitting the wave." Suddenly, the Stardust Dreamer shuddered violently. A massive surge of energy ripped through the ship, knocking out the main power. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the bridge in a dim red glow. The view screen went black, then flickered back to life. But it was no longer showing Xylos. It was showing an image from Captain Valerius's mind. On the screen, a stylized holographic image of an old, glorious battle from the human-viral war played out. It was a memory, amplified and projected by the city below. Valerius, looking decades younger, stood triumphant on the bridge of his old flagship, surrounded by his cheering crew. His eyes, fixed on the illusory battle, were filled with a profound, almost suicidal nostalgia. "They're not just sending memories," Lena whispered, horrified. "They're reading them, and they're feeding them back to us. They're trying to drown us in our own past." "Then we have to turn it off," Eris said, grabbing a plasma cutter. He looked at the main control panel, its conduit sparking. "We cut the source. Captain, what's the direct path to the city's power core?" But Valerius didn't hear him. He was lost, utterly consumed by his glorious simulated war. He was smiling, a beatific, distant smile, as his ship, the Stardust Dreamer, prepared to crash directly into the heart of the Forerunner city. He was leading his final charge, a hero in a battle that only he could see. And there was no way to stop him. The Stardust Dreamer screamed as it plummeted through the super-dense atmosphere of Xylos, a meteor of failing metal and human desperation. On the bridge, the holographic projection of Captain Valerius's long-dead flagship, the Valiant, now completely overlaid their reality. The ship's alarms were drowned out by the illusory sounds of plasma fire and the triumphant shouts of a ghost crew. Valerius, his face illuminated by the phantom explosions, was a hero in his own mind, leading one last glorious charge into oblivion. "He's locked us out," Eris yelled, his hands flying uselessly over a dead control panel. The helm controls are synced directly to his neural interface. As long as he's in that memory, the ship will follow his orders. They were going to die, killed by a ghost story. Lena Petrova, her mind still reeling from the psychic lullaby of the city below, watched the captain's beatific smile and had a sudden, desperate realization. The city wasn't just broadcasting. It was a psychic amplifier. It had latched onto the strongest, most coherent, and most emotionally charged memory it could find, Valerius's nostalgia for war, and was feeding it, making it real. They couldn't fight the captain, and they couldn't fight the ship. They had to fight the memory. "Eris, if it's amplifying his nostalgia, we have to give it a better signal," she shouted over the roar. "Something stronger. Something more complex than just war and glory. Eris's eyes widened in understanding. He looked around the bridge at the flickering emergency lights at the dying ship, and his gaze fell upon his own cluttered workstation. His mind, still buzzing with the phantom urge to play old video games, fix old tech, and read old books, saw the path. "My quarters," he yelled. "Now!" He scrambled from the bridge, Lena close behind him. They tore through the shuddering corridors to his room, a chaotic sanctuary of antiquity. He ignored the priceless books and the rare artifacts. He went straight for a large, black, reinforced case under his bunk. He threw it open to reveal his most prized, most impractical, and most useless possession, a perfectly restored 21st-century electric guitar, its crimson body a stark slash of color in the dim light. Beside it was a heavy box-like device covered in knobs and dials, an amplifier. "You're insane," Lena breathed. "The galaxy's been beige for 100 years, Lena," Eris shouted, grabbing the guitar. "It's time to make some noise." He raced back to the bridge, Lena retrieving her own ancient instrument, the violin, as they went. They were going to fight a memory with a feeling. They were about to create a nostalgia wave of their own. Back on the bridge, the ship was seconds from impact. The crystalline spires of the Forerunner city filled the view screen. Rushing up to meet them, Captain Valerius's face was ecstatic, ready to embrace his heroic end. Eris and Lena worked with a frantic, desperate energy. They ripped open a comms panel, exposing a tangle of fiber optic cables. Eris, using a knowledge of antique electronics that no sane person in the 25th century should possess, jury-rigged the amplifier's output directly into the ship's main broadcast array. "It's crude, but it'll work," he yelled. "It's gonna broadcast on every frequency we've got." He slung the guitar over his shoulder, cranked the amplifier's volume knob to its maximum setting, and struck a single, powerful chord. A sound of pure, glorious, and profoundly human chaos erupted from the ship. It was the raw, distorted, rebellious sound of rock and roll, an anthem of teenage angst and joyous rebellion that had not been heard in the galaxy for centuries. Eris, no master musician, played with a raw passion, pouring all his frustration with the bland, sterile present into the music. Lena raised her violin. She didn't try to play a classical piece. She met his raw power with a soaring, emotional, and heart-wrenchingly beautiful melody, the sound of ancient folk tunes, of love and loss, and the turning of the seasons. It was the music of dirt and rain and human history. Their combined sound, the raw power of the electric guitar and the soulful cry of the violin, was a wave of pure, chaotic, and deeply layered nostalgia. It wasn't the simple, clean memory of a single battle. It was the messy, contradictory, and beautiful memory of an entire culture. It was the feeling of a garage band, the joy of a festival, the melancholy of a lullaby, the fury of a protest song, all broadcast in a single, overwhelming wave. The effect on the Forerunner city was instantaneous. The holographic battle on the view screen flickered, distorted, and shattered like broken glass. The city, which had been amplifying Valerius's simple, powerful memory of war, was now inundated with a signal 1,000 times more complex and emotionally resonant. The hero's charge was drowned out by a symphony. Captain Valerius gasped, his eyes clearing as if waking from a long dream. The illusion of his old flagship vanished, replaced by the terrifying reality of the Stardust Dreamer's cockpit, alarms blaring as it plunged toward the crystal spires below. With a warrior's instinct, he grabbed the helm. "Brace for impact," he roared, pulling back with all his might. The ship screamed in protest, its engines firing with a desperate roar. It pulled up, its belly scraping against the tallest of the city's spires with a sound of grinding, tortured metal, before finally leveling out and coasting into a wounded, shuddering stop. They were alive. They had survived, saved by the ghost of a forgotten song. They had landed, or more accurately, crashed in a vast open plaza in the heart of the silent Forerunner city. A shimmering, iridescent energy field high above them held the crushing atmosphere of Xylos at bay, creating a bubble of calm, breathable air. The city was a marvel of impossible architecture, its crystalline towers glowing with a soft internal light. The chrono-resonance was still a palpable force here, a constant, low hum that now seemed to be echoing the last notes of Eris's guitar riff. After a tense hour of damage control, they determined the ship was in no immediate danger, though its engines were wrecked and its hull was severely compromised. They were trapped. "We need to find the source of the wave," Valerius said, his face grim and pale. The experience had shaken him to his core, leaving him humbled and deeply unnerved. "We need to turn this thing off." They ventured out into the silent city. It was not a ruin. It was perfectly preserved, a ghost town of crystal and light. The air itself seemed thick with memory. As they walked through a vast open-ended hall, the walls began to shimmer, displaying a holographic forest. Eris could almost smell the damp earth. Lena could hear the whisper of the wind through alien leaves. It was a place designed not to be lived in, but to be remembered in. "It's not a weapon," Eris breathed, his historian's mind reeling. "It's an archive. A library of feelings." They followed the hum of the chrono-resonance to the city's central spire. Inside, they found a cavernous chamber. At its center, floating in a containment field of pure energy, was a single, colossal, pulsating crystal. It was the heart of the city, the source of the wave, and its light was chaotic, uncontrolled, pulsing in a frantic, repeating loop. "The power on sequence is stuck," Lena said, her linguistic sense now able to read the energy patterns. "It's been dormant for eons. Something woke it up, but the startup failed. It's just broadcasting its boot-up sequence over and over, amplifying whatever strong memory it touches." This ancient godlike machine wasn't an aggressor. It was broken. It was a cosmic record player with the needle stuck, blasting the same jarring, amplified note across the entire galaxy. As the three of them, Eris, Lena, and a now chastened Captain Valerius, approached the great crystal, it responded to their proximity. Its chaotic pulsing smoothed and its light intensified, focused directly on them. It was not attacking. It was communicating. It was showing them why it had been built. A final, overwhelming memory, far older and more profound than any of theirs, flooded their minds. It was the memory of the Forerunners themselves. They saw the galaxy as it was millions of years ago, teeming with vibrant, passionate life. They saw the Forerunners, beings of light and energy, traveling not to conquer but to experience, to learn, to feel. But then they felt the Forerunners' great collective terror. From beyond the galactic rim, a new force was approaching. It was not an army or a monster. It was a form of sentient apathy, a psychic plague of nothingness that the Forerunners called the Grey Tide. The Grey Tide did not destroy civilizations with weapons. It consumed their meaning. It was a wave of pure entropy that erased history, art, emotion, and memory, leaving behind perfectly functional but soulless societies, their pasts forgotten, their futures a flat, featureless gray. It was the heat death of the soul, faced with an enemy they could not fight, for how can you fight nothing? The Forerunners made a final desperate gamble. They could not save their civilization, but they could save its memory. They built the great city, which they called Remembrance, as a storehouse for their most powerful feelings, their greatest joys, their deepest sorrows, their most profound loves, their most cherished nostalgia. The chrono-resonance was not a weapon. It was a vaccine, a final, desperate broadcast designed to reawaken the galaxy's own memories, to strengthen its own emotional reality, to fight a plague of forgetting with a tidal wave of remembering. The vision ended, leaving the three humans gasping in the silent chamber, the truth of their situation settling upon them with a cold, terrifying weight. The city hadn't just woken up on its own. Its ancient sensors had detected the first faint tendrils of its ancient enemy, the Grey Tide, finally arriving at the edge of their galaxy. The nostalgia wave was not the problem. It was the galaxy's only defense. It was an immune response against the coming apathy. And they, the three humans on a broken-down research ship, were now standing at the heart of the only weapon that could save them all. The three humans stood in the heart of the sleeping city, the great crystal pulsing with a chaotic, untamed energy. They now understood its purpose, to be a vaccine of memory against a plague of forgetting. But the weapon was broken. Its uncontrolled looping broadcast was a psychic fever, destabilizing the very galaxy it was meant to protect. If they were to have any hope against the coming Grey Tide, they couldn't just turn it off. They had to fix it. They had to complete its boot-up sequence and teach it a new, coherent song. "It's a musical interface," Lena Petrova said, her linguist's mind now seeing the energy patterns of the crystal as a form of musical notation. "It's not a computer you command. It's an instrument you have to play." It's been amplifying the loudest, simplest signal it could find. Valerius's memories of war. We have to give it a symphony, something complex and stable enough to guide it into a fully operational state. Captain Valerius looked at the crystal, his face etched with a new, profound understanding. His past, his glorious memories had almost doomed them. He had been a source of the problem. Now he had to become part of the solution. My memories of battle are too direct, too destructive, he said, his voice a low rumble. But what about the moments in between? The camaraderie on the eve of a battle, the shared grief for a fallen comrade, the quiet, unshakable loyalty to the person next to you in the trench. He closed his eyes, focusing not on the explosions and the glory, but on the faces of the men and women he had served with. He had to learn to remember not the war, but the reasons he had fought it. Eris Thorne, meanwhile, was seeing the problem with the clarity of a historian. All great civilizations are built on a foundation of shared stories, shared art. That's what this city needs. Not one memory, but all of them. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. It needs a history. He looked at his guitar, then at Lena's violin. They had the instruments. Now they had to write the anthem. As they began to formulate their plan, a new sensation washed over them. A feeling so alien and so chilling it froze them where they stood. It was the antithesis of the nostalgia wave. It was a wave of pure, colorless apathy. The vibrant, glowing light of the crystalline city seemed to dim, the colors becoming muted and gray. The deep, resonant hum of the central crystal faltered, becoming a flat, monotonous drone. Eris looked at his crimson guitar, and for a moment he couldn't remember why he had ever thought the color was beautiful. Lena felt the passion for her music drain away, leaving only a technical understanding of frequencies and vibrations. Captain Valerius's powerful memories of his comrades faded, their faces becoming blurry, their names losing their emotional weight. "What is this?" Lena whispered, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. I feel nothing. "It's here," Eris said, his own voice flat. The gray tide. A probe from the encroaching void had arrived. It was not a physical ship, but a psychic null field, a bubble of pure meaninglessness that was spreading through the system. It targeted the Stardust Dreamer first. On the bridge, the ancient coffee maker sputtered and died, its brief, joyful flicker of personality extinguished. The data bot that had learned to love music reverted to its factory settings, its optical sensor a dead, emotionless blue. The gray tide did not destroy. It erased. It consumed the why of everything, leaving behind a sterile, functional what. It was a psychic plague that fed on the very things that had saved them. Their passion, their history, their love. They were losing the meaning behind their memories, and with it, the power to fight back. The city of remembrance was beginning to forget itself. "We have to do it now," Eris yelled, fighting against the creeping gray in his own mind. He forced himself to remember the thrill of discovering a new fossil, the smell of an old book, the electrifying sound of a guitar solo. He held on to these memories like a drowning man clinging to a piece of wreckage. "We have to remind this city and ourselves who we are." They raced to the central crystal. This would be their one and only performance. They jury-rigged their instruments and the captain's neural interface directly into the crystal's energy field. They were no longer just broadcasting at the city. They were about to become its beating musical heart. Captain Valerius went first. He closed his eyes and pushed past the memories of battle, focusing instead on the quiet, powerful moments of human connection. He remembered the shared laughter in a trench before a battle, the silent, supportive hand on a shoulder after a loss. He became the foundation of their song, a deep, resonant bass note of duty, sacrifice, and unwavering camaraderie. Lena met his signal with a soaring, complex melody on her violin. She poured every piece of music she had ever known into it. The mournful folk songs of old Earth, the grand symphonies of the first colonies, the strange, beautiful compositions of alien worlds. Her music was the story of civilization itself, a melody of joy and sorrow, of love and loss, of 1,000 cultures reaching for the stars. Then Eris joined in. He unleashed a torrent of raw, chaotic, and beautiful sound from his electric guitar. It was the sound of rebellion, of discovery, of the untamable human spirit. It was the thrill of the first fire, the roar of the first engine, the static of the first radio broadcast. It was the rhythm of progress, the noisy, glorious, and unending search for something new. The three signals, the three human souls, poured into the great crystal, duty, art, and progress, camaraderie, culture, and curiosity. Together, they formed a nostalgia wave of breathtaking power and complexity. It was the anthem of Earth, a broadcast that screamed into the void. We remember everything, the pain, the joy, the mistakes, the triumphs, and it all matters. The crystal flared with a brilliant white light, the chaotic looping pulse smoothed into a strong, steady beat. The city of remembrance, its boot sequence finally complete, awoke. The anthem surged through its systems and then radiated outward in a great, cleansing wave. It struck the gray tide's probe, and the bubble of apathy, a thing of pure meaninglessness, dissolved instantly, unable to exist in the face of such profound and passionate meaning. The city of remembrance was now stable, broadcasting the anthem of Earth on a low, steady, and continuous frequency. It was no longer a chaotic, destabilizing force. It was now a psychic lighthouse, a gentle, constant hum that resonated across the galaxy, subtly strengthening the memories and cultural identities of every species it touched. The simmering, nostalgia-fueled conflicts began to subside, replaced by a new wave of cultural renaissances as forgotten art forms were rediscovered and old histories were re-examined with fresh pride. On the balcony of the central spire, Eris, Lena, and Valerius watched the swirling clouds of Xylos, which now seemed to dance in time with their music. They were the keepers of the city, the conductors of the galaxy's symphony. They could not go home. They had become the heart of the galaxy's immune system against the coming silence. Their work was not over. It had just begun. Messages began to pour into the city, not through comms but as emotional and cultural signals. The Vril, their ancient predatory instincts now tempered with a newfound respect for their own history, sent their oldest epic poems. The Solani broadcast their most sacred creation myths. The entire galaxy, reawakened by the nostalgia wave, began to contribute to it, adding their own stories, their own songs, their own memories to the great swelling chorus, strengthening the psychic shield against the gray tide. Eris looked at his companions. Valerius, the stoic soldier, was humming a quiet tune. Lena, the focused academic, was tapping her foot to an unheard rhythm. They were no longer just a crew. They were a band. The HFY truth was now the bedrock of a new galactic age. Humanity, the young chaotic species, pathologically obsessed with its own messy, vibrant, and contradictory past, had been the only one capable of wielding the ultimate weapon against an enemy that fed on forgetting. Our nostalgia, our art, our history, the very baggage we carried to the stars, was the galaxy's greatest and only hope. They were the keepers of the memory, and their watch had just begun.